What's up, y'all? This is Deep Talk with T, episode 11. Today's video is on Dharma. Dharma, not karma. Dharma has a lot of different meanings, I think, in a lot of different traditions. But I'm going to talk about it in terms of how it was introduced to me and relevant to me. Because that's the only way I can make sense of it being relevant to you in your life experience, because every one of us has our own. So, diving right into it. Dharma, it is, to put it in very human, practical terms, the way it was introduced to me, like I said, and the way that it was made relevant to me. There's something that in this life that you're good at that you like doing. And there's can be multiple things, you can combine things, but there's something in this life that you are good at that you like doing. And when you combine those two things, that is you living your purpose. That is Dharma. That is your path. So the way it was, again, it came up in my life post-Enlightenment, because the whole idea of life after Enlightenment, when you come to know yourself, not as this time-bound entity of the body and the experiences that have happened to it and the things that you relate to it, but the awareness that supersedes all of that. When you identify with that, then it orienting yourself to the human experience can be a task. It can be a task because you now don't see the world through the same lens. So understanding the way that you interact in the world at this point now is to take on a new set of parameters. And so Dharma becomes relevant because you're not just living from an egoic sense of satisfaction. You're not just trying to fulfill your ego, but now you're like, what am I doing on this planet? And how can I figure out what I'm supposed to be doing? And when you start looking at the things in your life that you've gravitated towards since you were young, that had nothing to do with you having a sense of ego pride, at least initially. It's not that you don't feel good about doing things that you do well, but when you start doing certain things just for the fun of doing them, they're not necessarily to big up some sense of ego. So, like kids who like to draw, for instance, or kids who like to play music, they don't necessarily, if you have a kid who you can't get away from a basketball court for 10, 12 hours, you have to make them come inside. Or you have a kid who you can't get away from a piano because they don't want to get away. Praise or no praise, people or no people around, audience or not, then that is what your calling is. That is what, at least at the time. And then you can, if you grow uninspired with something, maybe transitioning from being just someone who plays the piano to composing works of art becomes your calling, as opposed to just simply being a conductor or something like that. Like, you have to follow your inspiration, and that is your Dharma, that is your truth, that is your path. And that is you not living a cookie cutter life. To go back to some of these core elements, you are constantly living either your own purpose or some variation of that is not as authentic as it. And that's the whole point of life, is to live your authentic self, is to live your true self, is to live your vision. And you have to tap into what you're good at and what you like to do in order to do that. Because that's the only way that you're going to be fulfilled. If you're doing something that you don't like doing or that you're not good at, logically, like, how likely are you to enjoy doing that? You're not good at it. How can you enjoy doing that? Or even if you are good at it, if you don't enjoy doing it to an extent, it doesn't mean that you're not going to come up against things that aren't so fun in doing it. It doesn't mean that every single day is going to be like yippee, I can't wait to go. You're gonna have days because you're human where you don't feel like doing anything and you have to do something. So it doesn't mean that you shouldn't eat anymore because you're uninspired to eat right now. No, it just means that like today you're not feeling it, so you have to make yourself do certain things to feel it. That's part of having a daily program that induces progress and induces your best self to be manifest. You can do things to make your best self come into being and to come into this real time and space world. And then you can do things that make it seem like a figment of your imagination that you would ever be that. Because you can't fall in line and be aligned with what you need to do in action to be what you want to be in your vision. So again, tapping into your Dharma only even works even if you apply it. And it's not an easy process. For me, it was finding the world of acting, to go, I guess, into my story real quick, the way that it was made sense to me and the way it became relevant to me. Post Enlightenment, there was like, okay, well, I feel like I have died and gone to heaven in a way, because that ego that I was living through, that was a shell that would sometimes would torment the fuck out of me, because I couldn't see outside of it, so the torment was all I knew. And then sometimes you feel senses of highs from it when you're not like from drugs or anything like that, because in high school that wasn't what I was into. I was an athlete, and so the senses of highs and the lows came from relationships and came from like my relation to sports and such. Academics was sort of a given. I didn't really get a high off of like straight A's. That was more or less like expected from my parents. But when it came to life post Enlightenment, then it was like, oh well, I am not doing things just for the ego gratification anymore. So what am I doing them for? And that's where Dharma became relevant. What did I like doing before? It was about big upping my ego. And I had to tap into my childhood. I had to tap into things that not had been buried or anything like that, but just had never been fully explored, like my artistic inclinations, because they had never really been supported much. Not that they had ever been like fully bashed or anything like that, but I wasn't raised in a household by artistic people, and they didn't know how to support any sort of artistic inclinations. And when you have someone who's good at academics and athletics, and they happen to like art too, you kind of go with the ones that, even if you weren't necessarily a scholar or an All-American, that you know with a little bit more tangibility. School and sports have a little bit more tangibility than the path of arts. So that was what I'd been pushed into, school and sports. But when I was in college and I had this Enlightenment experience and I'd only really known school and sports, now I'm just wondering, what is it that I like to do and that I would want to do for the rest of my life? I fell away from football, and I was in philosophy and religious studies my freshman year of college, and then I transitioned into being a psychology major my sophomore year, because I had gotten answers to the questions that I was asking in philosophy and religious studies. So the Dharma thing became like, if I think back to like middle school, people have always, even to my younger years, older people even trusted me to, like, if I was in 7th grade, I'd have 8th grade girls telling me how they felt about different stuff. And so it was always a matter of like people being able to open up their vulnerable side to me and feel like they could trust me. And so I figured maybe that would be my calling, maybe, because I didn't mind listening to these people, and it gave me a sense of satisfaction to feel like I had helped them, at least in my younger years. And that you always feel good when you feel like you help somebody, but the idea that you help somebody when you've given them something that you've said that they like to hear but they don't necessarily apply, in your younger years that may seem more satisfying than in your older years when you see that people's behavioral patterns don't necessarily change based on what they hear and what they agree with. So that's what you tend to hold people with more in higher regards to and give more respect to, is people whose behavioral patterns fall in line with what their fucking vision is. So that all goes back to what is your vision and living in accordance with it. Finding it is not always an easy process. And again, I'm just talking about my process and finding it because this was college years and I was just getting out of, again, I was in school, I graduated from college in 4 years, but it was a matter of exploring and finding what it was that I felt like I was called to do after sports, because I fell away from that path. And then from philosophy and religious studies to psychology, I realized psychology wasn't what I felt called to do. I didn't feel called to sit in front of, I felt like I was going to get rich off of listening to depressed rich people and doing what I had done more or less in my middle school years, was just give people advice that they didn't necessarily apply but like to hear. And I didn't see that being purpose driven and purpose filled and fulfilling because of it. And I didn't want to live a life like that. So I continued to tap in and said, what was it that was aside from just feeling like I was helping somebody else or had something to do with somebody else, but what is it that I like to do? I used to like to draw and such, but I don't really like want to make a career out of just drawing. That was just a hobby here and there, but like not even something I want to tap into like full time. So if you feel that type of inclination towards something, it's like just a hobby, but I don't want to tap into it full time, then again, that's not necessarily your Dharma. You have to really listen to yourself and follow what you get from your instincts, from your intuition, from your inspiration, from your experience. So I continued to tap in. And I remembered a play, A Midsummer Night's Dream by Shakespeare. We did the abridged version for middle schoolers when I was in middle school, and I fell in love with the language of it. I memorized the whole play, ended up playing 2 parts of it when we did it, and I just fell in love with the language of it. I realized that I had always been someone who was good with words. I had won papers. I had been published for poetry. I had won awards for papers and such in school, and had always been like, I had a way with words. Numbers, I had always been good enough to get by with in school, and it was simple and stuff like that. But like when it came to like math, that was always my least favorite subject. I hated dealing with numbers, so I knew that wasn't the path. But I realized, it's words. Like I can get down with some words, and the fact that like I'm an active person. I've always been an athlete. I've always been an animated, energetic person. So sitting in an office all day doesn't necessarily appeal to me. Being active with my body and being active with my emotions and my mind, that appeals more to me. That appeals much more to me. So that being the case, I said, what about acting? Yeah, I'm 21 and I'm a junior in college. So what? Maybe figure it out. Let's try it. Or I was 20 at the time, not 21 yet. I was 20. And it was my sophomore year when I was deciding to take an acting class my junior year. Took the acting class, fell in love with it. I fell in love with the tools of script analysis, because they helped me make sense of the human experience post-Enlightenment for myself. And that's why I apply them to this day for other people when I'm making sense of anything that someone is telling me about their own life, or making sense of my own life and where I'm at and what I need to do in order to get where I want to be. It offers clarification is what it does. And that's what I was looking for. I was looking for tools to help me clarify my experience. And they gave that to me, the tools of script analysis. And then they offered me, the acting world offered me a world to actively bring my imagination into the world. When you have a very active imagination, the idea of bringing it into the world and to play with it in the world. For me as a kid, it manifested in action figures and making up stories for hours, or drawing or watching Sailor Moon or Dragon Ball Z or cartoons or whatever to find storylines and an outlet for this vivid imagination that I had. And then I got this idea that big boys didn't play with toys, and I put my toys up. And I stopped focusing on art and I focused on athletics. And I did what I thought I was supposed to do until I started listening to myself again. And then I found that these tools help me orient myself to the human experience, because everybody has given circumstances. That's how you start making sense of your world in an egoic way, but most people do it unconsciously and they focus and highlight on certain things. But everything that happens to you from the time and the moment that you're conceived is the beginning of your given circumstances, as far as you can even start to pinpoint in this world. So to not take it any further than that, the way that your experience goes in the womb is so pivotal. If your mother does drugs when you're in the womb, that is going to affect you for the rest of your life. If she nurtures you and takes the best of care of herself, that is going to affect you. How you are treated when you come out, and your experience from there. Your base level needs being met, and your sense of security being built, and your sense of emotional intimacy being built, your sense of self being built, and your sense of purpose in the world being built. All these things are a part of your upbringing. All these things are a part of your experience from the beginning of your conception. And so, with that being the case, you, again, have your own unique path. You have to tap into it. For me, acting and psychology helped make the most sense of the world, because the tools of script analysis gave me a way to make sense of just life, given circumstances, objectives. Your needs are correlated directly to your objectives, from your need to breathe to your need to fulfill some Lamborghini truck wish, to any need that you can fathom. They all fit as an objective. If you have a need for something, you can call it an objective. You can those two words are synonymous in this cosmology that I'm talking about. So you have given circumstances, objectives, what you really want more than anything, which is your super objective. And it could be the totality of your vision. It doesn't have to be just in one word. It could be the totality of your vision. You could say what you want more than anything is to be financially free to work in a certain field, to have a certain type of life with your wife or kids, or your husband or kids, or whatever, to have no kids, to have no spouse, to whatever your vision is. The totality of that could be your super objective. Your obstacles, whatever's in your way, internally and externally, whatever you may be the only thing. Most of the time, we're the only things getting in our way. In this day and age, in this technologically advanced world, where nature's obstacles have been more or less neutralized most of the time, it's not that nature doesn't come up and knock us upside our head and remind us that she has way more power than we do as humans. Nature can fuck us up at any given time, and please don't forget that. Please don't ever think that we are bigger than nature, because we can house ourselves and predict when certain things are going to happen, more or less, so we can prepare for them better. We've come a long way in terms of our ability to protect ourselves against the threats of nature, but we still have the threats of nature, and we always will as humans. We're always vulnerable to that. That should make you feel more alive. That reality is not something to be denied and shunned and be. If you let that fear paralyze or cripple you, it's only diminishing the quality of your life. You have to embrace it as part of fate. Amor fati, love life, and that's a whole nother episode we'll talk about. But given circumstances, objectives with your super objective, guiding all of those objectives, whether or not you're aware of it, that's the guiding star. Your obstacles, whatever's in your way. Your tactics and actions, how you go about getting these things. And then what they mean to you, the stakes. You really have to raise the stakes and make it juicy. Raise the bar. We talked about that in another video, but raise the bar. But for now, we'll leave it at that, because Dharma and finding out what your path is such a personal, individual journey that only you can do it for you. You have to really That requires the work of reflecting. That requires the work of introspection and asking yourself certain things and really listening and going. Imagine a world full of inspired people who were in touch with themselves and in touch with their vision, who were solidified in it, who did not cave because of other people's expectations or opinions. What a strong, empowered, positive world that would be. I don't think anybody would be trying to tear anybody else down because they would be so solid in who the fuck they were and what they did that they wouldn't be trying to big up. They may have to call people out who were pipe dreaming and may have to just hold a mirror in front of their faces, or in terms of like, hey, this is what you're saying your circumstances are and what your objectives are and what these stakes are for your objectives to you. But these are the tactics and actions or inactions that you have going, and that's not in line. If you're not acting in accordance with what you say you want, that's not in line. So that's not hating, that's helping. Because if you really care about somebody and they were claiming that they wanted to look a certain way, if they weren't eating properly and they weren't working out properly, you would have to say, hey, I know that you said that this is what your circumstances are, this is where you're at with your height and your weight and your body fat, and you obviously can't just grow your height, but you can change your weight, your body fat, and your muscle composition, and that's what you want to do. And then this is how you're going to have to do it. And this is, if you say this is what it means to you, then you're going to have to do more than what you're doing, and you're going to have to do different than what you're doing. And if you don't do more and you don't do different, then you don't really want it. And that's, again, just the reality of it. So your Dharma's not always going to be an easy path to follow. You have to really listen to yourself. You have to really do the self-work. And it's not going to always be so clearly illuminated as to where you know from Indiana to California how you're going to get there or where you're going to go. You may have to figure it out piece by piece. You may only have just a little bit of light ahead of you to be able to see, but you have to continue to trust enough to keep going. And if you don't die, then you're learning, and you will figure it out if you do not quit. The questions don't stop, but neither do the answers. So, for now, tap into your Dharma. Make it mean something to you. Much love.